everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Coffee with Keira, the exciting podcast where I chat with people about their different careers to teach teens about potential jobs. I'm Keira, and joining me today in the coffee shop is Courtney O'Connor. We'll be discussing her amazing job as a marketer for NASA. See you inside. Hey Courtney, and welcome to the coffee shop. How's your morning been so far?
It's been going pretty well. Busy with some emails, but glad I could take a coffee break with you.
Thank you for joining me so early. So, what's your cup this morning?
In my cup this morning, it's nothing too exciting. It is a coffee with some half and half and a little bit of cinnamon.
Nice. I just have sweet tea.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Well, I've heard a lot about your awesome job at NASA, but could you tell us a little bit about what your job is and where exactly you work?
Sure. I work at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and my job is in the communications department. So I have the really cool job where I get to translate all the science and engineering that's happening at NASA so that the general public and the media, students, teachers, everybody can get excited about the work we're doing. And I focus specifically on social media. So I spend a lot of my time on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Wherever the public is, we try to be there at NASA.
That's really cool. I know times are a little bit different right now because of Corona, but what does a typical workday look like for you?
So my typical workday hasn't changed too much during COVID. The biggest change is the setting. So instead of going into the office where I would take the metro, it was a 45-minute commute usually, even though I am within the city. Now I just wake up and I walk from my bedroom to my kitchen table. But the day-to-day is pretty similar since most of what I'm doing is already online. So start the day with a call every morning with our entire digital team where we look at all the different products that are coming out for the day. So it could be a mission has a new video, or maybe on a really cool day we have something like a launch where that would be the entire day we would spend working on that one activity. But from there, it is a lot of planning meetings. I spend a lot of time on telecons and then drafting products, whether it's a press release or a tweet or working on a script for a video. Each day is a little bit different, but that's kind of what I love about the job is that it doesn't get boring.
Yeah, you get to do different things each day.
Yeah.
I watched the last launch and I got to see all like the social media stuff and what everyone was doing on there. So that was cool.
Very cool. Was it the Mars Perseverance launch, or we also had a human spaceflight launch in the last couple months? It's been very busy during COVID.
Yeah, I think it was the human space one.
Yeah, that one was really exciting. It was the first time in close to 10 years that we launched American astronauts from the United States with this new program that we're doing with SpaceX and another commercial team. So it's really cool to have that coming back here. If it was any time other than COVID, I probably would have gotten to go to Florida to see that launch, which would have been amazing to see in person. But it was still really cool to see just how many people tuned in to watch it live online.
Yeah. For your job, do you get to travel a lot?
I do get to travel a lot, not in the current state of things. Travel is really on hold unless it's mission critical. NASA has been really good about looking out for the safety of employees. So even for that Florida launch, a lot of my coworkers chose to drive from DC rather than fly. So everybody is really looking at like what works best for them and their families. But usually I do get to travel a lot. I work a lot with individual missions, and the mission science teams meet a couple times a year at different locations, mostly here in the United States, but sometimes international travel, which is really fun when we get to do that. And those meetings they're usually at different universities that we have that are connected to the missions. So For example, with the Juno mission, which is at Jupiter right now, I've gone several times to Boulder, Colorado, where a lot of the science team is located. So I'll get to go there, and sometimes I'm like a fly on the wall there because like I report out on what we're doing for communications, but the main point of those meetings is for people to really debate the science results that they're seeing. And so I get to just have this really front row seat to a lot of science and see, images of Jupiter that have never been seen by the public before. So that's a really fun part of my job.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's really cool. What's the coolest place that you've gone to visit because of work?
The coolest place. I would have to say, and I've gotten to go a couple times, but going down to Cape Canaveral, Florida, which is where we launch a lot of our missions, is cool for so many reasons. First, just like the history of the place. That's where all the Apollo missions launched. And when I go out there, I get to tour the different facilities because usually I'm with members of the media or the public that we invite out to the launches. So we get to give them these really fun VIP experiences. And then just seeing a launch firsthand, there's really no way to describe like how cool that is. It's so loud. You can like feel it as well as hear it. And when I'm with these VIPs, sometimes they're very important people. They have seen and done a lot of really cool things in their lives, but everybody is always so awestruck by a launch. So it's always fun seeing people view one for the first time.
Yeah. I always watch it on TV, but like I've always wanted to go and see it in person because it just seems so cool.
You guys should definitely do that. Family trip.
For your job, do you get to meet a lot of different people and go to different places?
I do, and I think a big part of that is because of my role in communications. Mm-hmm. So I work with a lot of different missions. I work with a lot of different NASA leadership because the people that we interact with on communications are usually the more senior people because that's who we have in a press conference. That's who we quote in a news article. So I get to meet, some of the most brilliant people, I think probably on the face of the planet, who are working on these missions, whether it's, the NASA administrator. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times, to, astrobiologists who are searching for life on other worlds. So yes, I get to meet some very cool people.
That's awesome. Within your department, do you enjoy the people you work with? And do you have like a big team or a small team?
The communications team is quite large, but it's because if you think of all the different people that we're communicating to, each person has their own niche. So we have our education communications team. We have the people who are looking out for like legislative affairs, which is the people who are interacting with people in the White House or in different government positions. But the digital team, which I'm a part of, is actually not as big as you would think it is. When you think about just on Instagram alone, we have 60 million followers. There are about, I would say, 3 or 4 of us who manage that on a day-to-day basis. So it's really not that big of a team when you think of everybody that we're reaching.
Yeah, I figured it would be bigger than that.
Yeah. But it is. What was that?
You go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you also asked if I like everybody I work with. And, like any job, sometimes you have difficult personalities, but in general, yes. And usually when, people disagree, it's because people are very passionate about what they do. I don't work with anybody, I don't think, who's just, punching in and punching out. People really care about the work they're doing and love it so much. So like that is one thing I miss with COVID. I do really miss going in and seeing the excitement of my coworkers each day to do what we do.
Yeah, it's more convenient being at home to get the same experience.
Yeah.
What's the best part of your job, in your opinion?
There are so many great parts of my job, but I would have to say my favorite thing is when I get to work on one of these big mission events. So if it's a launch to the International Space Station, or we have the Perseverance rover that's going to be landing on Mars in a couple months, I really love the strategic planning that goes into a lot of these events where you're coordinating with hundreds of people to make sure that this one moment goes correctly. So it's, all like drafting up all of the tweets and planning out all of the press conferences and making sure that you're working with the scientists and engineers to make sure that you're talking about everything that they're doing in an accurate way. Even if we're, sharing things with the public and we want to make sure people understand what we're doing, we don't want to somehow misinterpret what is the key part of this mission. So I really love, like the day-to-day of the job is fun, but it's really the planning for the big moments that I love the most.
Mm-hmm. Kind of sounds like an online party planner.
Yeah, it is kind of.
It all for a moment.
Yeah. And part of that usually does include planning for these in-person events. One thing we do at NASA, we do these events called NASA Socials, where we invite members of the public who are on social media to attend these big mission events. So some of it is event planning where, you're figuring out the lunch orders and the check-in times and working with security on badges. And so that's a part of the job that is not currently going on with COVID, but we're looking at ways that we can make those types of events virtual moving forward.
So can you describe to me the path of from school to how you wound up pursuing this career?
Yeah, I did not have a huge interest in space and science, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I always gravitated towards English and history, and in college I became a communications major, specifically in public relations. I knew I liked communicating with the public, and I saw myself maybe going in the nonprofit route, so working to communicate work that different nonprofits are doing. But while I was in college, I got an internship with a PR firm where I was working with Microsoft. And this was in the beginning of companies using social media. And so I was this very lowly intern who they had running a lot of Microsoft social media when I was 20, 21 years old. And so because of that, I was able to position myself as somebody who had this social media expertise that was different from somebody who just maybe was on Facebook as for their personal account. So after college, I was trying to figure out what to do, trying to figure out where to go, and I happened to be in California. So at that time I was living up in Washington because I went to college up in Seattle, but I was visiting my family down in California, and my mom, of all people, let me know that she had been looking at some jobs that she thought that I would be a great applicant for. She was basically my recruiter, which was really nice. And one of them was at the NASA Center that's in Los Angeles, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And it really seemed like it was a good fit. So even though I was only home for the week, I went out and I bought a suit and I went in for an interview. And the day that I was leaving, I found out that I got the job. So I then had a couple weeks to fly up to Seattle, move all my things back down, and start this job that I, really kind of fell into. But since then, this is why I was saying that I was not super into space or science. Since then, I've had this secondary education because I work every day with scientists and engineers, and I read about all their work and I see what they're doing, and I feel like now I have this such a love for these fields that I didn't really know about. And that's part of what makes me passionate about telling these stories, is because I know that there are people like me who don't know that they're a big science nerd. They need somebody like me to bring it down to them in a way that really just shows how exciting it all is.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you know a lot about how to do this job before with your previous education, or did you learn a lot of it from your employer?
I learned some of the basic, with a communications background, I do have, that background in, how to write a press release, how to deal with crisis communication. So if something bad happens, how do you deal with that? That was one of my favorite classes in college. But so much of that is just what you read in a book. It's not actually what you do on a day-to-day basis. So I've been really lucky to have mentors at work who have really guided me along the way, and have taught me so much, in how to do my job, but then also how to interact with other people, how to lead a meeting, how to deal with a difficult person, how to, plan a large event. So much of that I don't think is actually taught in the classroom. It's actually from that real life experience.
Yeah. So for your job, would you say that you have to be more of an extrovert in order to succeed?
I think that's a fair assumption. I like to think of myself as being an extroverted introvert. I definitely like to be the one behind the camera, not in front. Doing this interview with you is something that I don't typically do, because I'm the one who's usually getting my experts in front of the camera to talk about what we do. A lot of what I do is more behind the scenes. But because so much of the job is this, strategic planning with large groups of people, you do have to have some extrovert tendencies to be able to, talk to a big group of people like that, and not get intimidated, and really know how to lead a group like that.
If you hadn't chosen this career, what would have been your next choice?
Well, this is very similar, but like I said, I had thought that I would do communications for a nonprofit, which in a way I somewhat am. NASA is not for profit. We are a government institution. We're not making any money here. Everything that we get, from taxpayer money goes directly into the missions and the people who work on these missions. But something else that I had always looked into was going into education. I thought for a while that I might be a teacher, specifically in special education. And it's definitely something that I, keep in the back of my mind as something as, a second career someday, that I would love to work more hands-on with kids. But now that I've had this experience with NASA, probably bringing in a lot more of what I've learned over, the last decade.
Mm-hmm. I know you said that you weren't exactly really excited about space and all of that before, but what did you want to be as a kid? Like when you were younger, what was your...
Yeah. So actually, I did want to be a teacher. I went into college thinking I was going to do that, and I worked a few summers as a teacher's aide, specifically in special ed, working with autistic kids, and it was an experience that I loved. But I realized at the end of the day that it really was not going to be the right fit for me for the rest of my life. It was something that I really loved doing, but that there were other people who were maybe more patient, who, there are some people who are just, made to do that type of work. They're just so well fitted for that. And I saw myself not doing that to the same degree that they could. So that's when I kind of had that shift of going from education to communications.
Nice. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's a good question. I really do still see myself at NASA. I don't think, and maybe that's because I've always been here, but I think it's such a unique place to work, and there is so much room for growth still in terms of, moving up that corporate ladder, maybe managing a team, who knows, becoming the news chief someday. That I haven't had a boring day yet. And I think part of that is that there is this ability to jump to different positions. I've now had 3 different jobs at NASA. So, the second I start to get bored, I can start looking for something else, and it still is within the same field that I love.
So you get to keep moving around, so everything's different.
Right.
Do you have any words of advice for anyone who is looking to pursue a similar job, or same job as you?
Yeah, some advice I would have is to say yes to different opportunities. You never know when something's going to come your way. I think, from my PR internship that, gave me that social media experience early on, to applying for a job that I didn't know if it was going to be the right fit. You really never know what's going to happen. And that it's okay to not know exactly what you're going to want to do, but just to keep taking classes that interest you, to keep learning, I think is important. And then specifically for social media and communications, I would say this is a field that is just getting started. It's come a long way in the last decade, and I'm constantly having to look at new platforms, whether it's TikTok or Tumblr or whatever it might be. So keeping yourself aware of all these different platforms and making sure that you understand them and know how to use them. One of my colleagues, she is probably 20 years older than me, and she's one of the best people in the business at social media. And she did not grow up with social media. She didn't even have it, when she was my age, but she took it upon herself to learn this new skill set. And I think that's something with communications is to always keep in mind, is that the platforms might change, but the job is still pretty similar. You're still translating content for the public, whether it's in a tweet or in an hour-long broadcast. So just to keep learning and keep an eye out for new platforms, because you could at 22 become the best in the business at something if it's something that you saw early on and learned how to use.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, and I really liked all you're saying, and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Great. Of course. It's great talking to you. Cheers.
Oh, where's the camera? Thank you. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Coffee with Keira.